interdimensional contact. Imagine spending 90 days in a different dimension on a big spaceship and then sharing it with the world. Would you think you were crazy? I probably would. Now, whether or not this is somebody's elaborate imagination or true transdimensional contact, it sure is fun to listen to, and you can watch the full episode on our Patreon page. Make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, hit the bell for all notifications, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment in the comment section, and share this video out, and enjoy the podcast.
They will see that there used to be an intense persecution of anybody who had an open mind. And they did that through these insane asylums where people had all their human rights violated. They were getting frontal lobotomies where they were removing sections of their brain. And I believe our brains and our bodies are technology. They are doorways. They open up portals for us to have these amazing experiences, and how we all had to think the same to fit into a very narrow band of reality within society, which was dictated by the ruling classes. And it still carries over till today. Oh my God, you don't want people thinking you're crazy. Well, what's the first thing that happens when you come out about your paranormal experiences? You're considered a tinfoil hat wearer and you lose all credibility. The second thing I was taught, Rex, is that this was evil, opening myself up to demons, opening myself up to the devil. Oh my God. Again, fear, 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 this way and that way to get us to shut it down. Well, I did shut it down for a number of years. And then when I was having a I had a visitation from angelic forces, and that opened me up to what was possible. And they said they would give me a gift. I've written about this extensively in my book. They said they'd give me a gift. And I said, well, what kind of gift? And they said, that's for you to decide. And I said, can I think about it? They said, sure, just let us know when you're ready. So there are realms, Rex, that coexist with us all the time. Our perceptual arena is very narrow. What we can see in the color spectrum, what we can hear in our auditory range, what we can feel from a electromagnetic, that's what touch is. We're super, super bound into a very narrow a perceptual arena. There are all kinds of beings all around us. We just don't see them, hear them, unless we're tuned into them. So I was tuned in, I guess. And this is the other thing that myself and Chris Bledsoe and many other experiences are finding, that when we're under intense state of suffering, these invisible or quasi-visible beings reach out to us. So anyway, I took a few days and I thought about it, and I decided what I really needed was wisdom. I mean, I thought about all the other stuff like money and popularity and fame and all that I thought might help me. But really, I knew if I had wisdom, I would be okay and I'd fulfill whatever my purpose, which I didn't know yet, but I found out later would be. And that preceded all the other experiences that I had. And then I can't explain why, except that perhaps because I don't care what people think of me and I would write the truth in my book. That's the only explanation I can think of why I was given this wonderful transdimensional experience where I was transported to what I call the big ship. And again, I'm using my own language to talk about things that I don't have accurate or scientific terms for. So the book is a pretty easy read, but what I've done is written it from the perspective that I take you with me into my journey. I take you into the sights, the smells, the tastes, the complete experience. I was aware that I was having some ET contact, and I knew it was happening while I was sleeping. But this was done in what I would consider a disembodied state. So you could consider it astral projection, but I actually see an overlap between astral projection, remote viewing, lucid dreaming. Like they're very close in the end result. And I knew that I was in these meetings with these beings. We would always be I wasn't aware that I was on the big ship until later, but I was aware that I was in like this huge room. That the desk or table that we sat at was round. There was a hole in the center where holographic images were projected for our learning and our discussion, and they were intensely interested in my perspective of my life experience here on Earth and this sort of point in the time space continuum. Very interested in how I saw things. I didn't realize that there's actually millions of us that are doing this kind of work. We just don't remember. And it just happened very abruptly. It went on for 3 months of our time, but there's a time dilation. So while I was away, I could be experiencing days, weeks, even months, and then wake up in the morning back in my bed, and it was just the next day. And it was really weird and very psychologically difficult for me to cope with when I was back on Earth. So I had like 3.5 years worth of experiences and training aboard the big ship, but I was only gone at night while I was sleeping for a 3-month period of our Earth time, and then it stopped as abruptly as it started. And I knew I needed to sort it out and to let people know, because it was too fantastic. And I had never done anything to earn it. I wasn't some kind of a guru or had special meditation practices, but I knew if this was happening for me, it was probably happening for other people. And it left me very disoriented. I completely separated myself from everything social. I just kept to myself. I'd wake up in the morning, make a cup of tea, and wonder what the just happened. Oh my God. And at first I thought I was dreaming. And then I realized, no, I was not dreaming, because I would pick up every night where I left off just before I woke up in the morning. It was congruent. It was every single night. It made sense. It was amazing, Rex. Absolutely amazing. And so it took me seriously, this was in 2014, it took me a couple of years just to sort of sort myself out and start making sense of it. And then in 2019 is when I went on Chris Matthews' Forbidden Knowledge News program. And he let me come on and talk about it. And then later he invited me to to take part in his online Forbidden Knowledge Con, which was a online conference. And that's when I met Preston Dennett. Preston said, "Can I have a copy of your manuscript, and can I share it with my friend Dolly, who turned out to be Dolly Saffron?" And I said, "Sure." And I sent it to him, and he wrote back, said, "Karen, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. People need to know this." And so that's started me writing my book. But it was interesting that, like, I knew last year I had to get busy and get on with it. I had been working on it and dabbling with it and kind of dragging my feet, because I thought it's too weird, it's too fantastic, nobody's going to believe this. But my guides kept telling me, you need to do this. And it was funny, I'd be sitting at the computer typing away, and if I didn't type it the way my guides wanted me to accurately portray what my experience was like, I had to go back and keep changing it until they felt it was right, if that makes sense. And it didn't get published until the end of last year. And I knew the time was right, and I had to get it published then. I knew I had to get it published before the end of the year. And then, boom, all these people are talking transdimensional ET contact. Like, it just is, I couldn't have planned it better, Rex, the way the whole thing unfolded. So, anyway, I'd love to tell you about the technology aboard the big ship, the beings, what they look like, even what they eat. If you want to know, I can even tell you how they go to the bathroom. Like I know everything, and it's all in great detail within my book, from my orientation to what their purpose is, about intergalactic resettlement, what that's all about the pre-settlement um, 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 adventures where we would go onto other worlds, and we would do assessments, because there's like millions and billions of these planets. They got animals, atmosphere, water, fish, trees, everything, bugs, but no humanoids. interesting is I discovered that humanoids are actually placed onto these prepared habitats. So, which goes quite a bit against the whole theory of evolution.
Did you take notes when these events were happening?
No, it's too messed up. Rex, can you imagine going to sleep? You're aboard a big ship. You're discovering the technology and the beings and all of this. You're in awe. You're just in awe. And you come back in the morning, your head is so full because you've been away within one of our nights. You've been away for maybe 2 weeks or 2 months worth of everyday experiences. So I'd wake up and my head would be so full. I would just be like wandering around like an idiot. Like seriously, I couldn't even go out in public because my head was so full. And I think that's why it only lasted for 3 months. And no, I didn't take notes, nothing. And some of my memories I had right from the get-go, but it wasn't until 2020 with the assistance of my friend who I call Bob the Gray, who's an interdimensional type of gray. He helped me through releasing my memories so that I could remember enough to start making notes and typing stuff up. And yeah, that's sort of how it went for me.
How did he do that?
Well, okay, I'm going to just tell you about Bob. This is the weirdest thing. So back in 2005, Bob started contacting me, but he contacted me through the portal of my imagination. And I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me. Like he started showing up in my mind's eye and giving me information and answering questions and stuff. And finally I said, no, I don't want to be a crazy person. I'm imagining this. You're not real. I haven't seen you face to face. And I actually started making fun of him because I wanted it to stop. I didn't understand what was going on. And so it stopped until after 2000, well, not sure, after 2014. Then when I really needed some help to sort this out, he came back because now I was ready to listen. Now, because of this other experience, I realized transdimensional reality is a real thing. And he started helping me. And the funny thing about Bobby, in my mind's eye, he looks like what we would consider a stereotypical gray. But as I understand it, he is actually higher in the dimensional realities, a little bit closer to angels. His function is to connect with humans and humanoids on other places. Anyway, so Bob assisted me by what I would do either lucid dreaming or I would do astral projection. He would meet with me. He always made me laugh. He had a sense of humor. That's one thing you never hear about Grays having a sense of humor. We're all taught that they're all like those automated ones, that are fleshly, but basically are like robots. Like we hear about them a lot, but we don't really hear about other races of Grays. Well, anyway, Bob, he actually has a fantastic sense of humor. I get into that in the book as well. And he would often make me laugh because I'd be taking all of this too seriously and it would kind of heavy psychologically, and he wanted me to lighten up and know that this is a natural phenomenon. And the other thing too is the reason I'm talking about it is because there are millions of us that are having these experiences, but we're taught, oh, that's your imagination. Oh, that's demons. Oh, people are going to think you're crazy. Don't tell your psychiatrist about this. You know what I'm saying? And so I want other people, many people, when they read my book, they'll go, oh my God, that part of the book, I've had that experience. That part, I've had that experience. I thought I was imagining it. Just to let people start to loosen up and realize that our bodies are fantastic technologies. We can go and do things. And then the more we open up to that, Rex, oh my God, the more we become the change we want to see in the world because we can't be fooled anymore. Once reality expands, it doesn't go back, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So let's go back to your first experience that you had in 2014. And then you said it's like congruent for 90 days approximately after that.
Yep.
And you go to sleep and you're starting right back where you were left off.
Absolutely. And I'm going to be honest, I have no recollection of a spaceship showing up, beaming me or taking me aboard, none of that. But then later I found out that they wouldn't do that because, well, they are transdimensional. Let me give you an example. People want to know, where is this big ship? Is it in our solar system? Is it in our galaxy? Where is it? And I say, well, it's in none of those places. So I just want you to imagine in a minute within your mind an image of a daisy, and a daisy with like 100 petals on it. Each petal, this is a Venn diagram, each petal represents a different point space, a different dimensional reality, a different reality within the multiverse. Some of those petals would overlap and be in the spiritual realms. We're talking huge diversity of what we as humans would categorize as different kinds of reality. And imagine that all those daisy petals overlap at the very center. Well, that's interdimensional space. And that's where the big ship is located. And because it's located and traverses through interdimensional space, it's everywhere and it's nowhere. It's outside of what we would consider the time space continuum. That would explain the time dilation, the way it travels, the way it energizes itself. It's amazing. And the big ship is organic and conscious. This is not something that's fabricated. This is something that's birthed and grown to suit the purpose of the beings that are aboard the big ship. And the technology is like nothing I have ever seen talked about here on Earth. Basically, the big ship can materialize, and I'm using my own language here because I don't know the actual terms. And we don't speak English aboard the big ship, it's all telepathic. So I don't have English words to tell you. But to me, it seemed like nano, self assembling, biological nano components. So it's like the ship itself, because it's telepathic, it knows what you need, it knows what you want, right? And it just manifests right before you whatever you need. It just assembles and it looks like magic. If I didn't understand it as being a technology, I would think it was magic. So it comes into being, you use it for whatever purpose, be it to go to the washroom or, the food preparation stations or whatever. And then it disassembles and disappears before your eyes when you're done with it. Even the doorways, it's not like Star Trek where they have the doors open when you approach them and then close afterwards. No, there's just these walls. And as you approach them, a doorway assembles, and after you go through, the doorway disassembles. So everything was incredible that way. And there was no screens and technology, nothing like that. There's a crew who we might consider to be the engineers who interface for technical purposes with the consciousness of the big ship, but it's all done telepathically. And they're able to meet the needs of the big ship just through being telepathic.
Tell us about the engineers, please.
They're just beings who spend their time training in looking after the big ship. So let me tell you that on the big ship, there's no money. There's no commerce. You don't have to work to make tokens to buy your food or to pay for your lodging or your education. There's nothing like that. Everything is just able to be provided for you, and there's no money. So everybody chooses to accept training and get experience in whatever's their passion. So there's some people or beings who have a natural affinity to want to be more integrated on a conscious level with the big ship, and they just train through other people, through the virtual reality system, whatever. There's 3 ways of learning. There's tablets, there's the virtual reality system, and then, if you were born on the big ship, you would just telepathically communicate with it. Think about it as being like the most advanced quantum computer AI you could ever imagine, except it's biological. and it actually has feelings and emotions. So these engineers, they train and they interface with. Let me tell you where the ships come from. There's a place I
What do they
learned
look
this
like?
through. What does it look like?
No,
Well,
the
it looks very
engineers.
much.
The
Whoops, there's
engineers.
an image beside me here. There's a golden flower of life that represents a Venn diagram of everything joining. But in the center, you'll see that black thing. It looks like a button, a black button. It's got little arms on the sides. So it looks like a sphere that's squished down from the top and up from the bottom. So it's sort of flattened on the top and bottom, and it's spherical. And then it's got these arms that come out, and that's where the docking bays are. So there is a place, at least one, probably more than one, where these ships are what I would call be born. So in these other realities, they take a small star and a number of these, what I will call city ships, form a grid pattern um, all around and like a spherical grid pattern around a small star. And then their docking bay, like the extensions, all come out and point straight out, and they connect point to point through these docking arms and form this grid that surrounds a small star. And then there's like millions of them that are all joined up there. And these are specific habitats where I don't know the exact details, but this is where new city ships are created, born, and are raised to the point of maturity that they could break off and then go into other dimensional realities. And at that point, they get a crew from all the other city ships. Volunteers come forward and they go on to the new city ship. They break off and they go into other dimensional realms and serve different purposes. And then the mesh just kind of, all the city ships just kind of move position to close up the hole that would be left from the city ship that's departed, right? And they form, the cohesive unit. And that's what they do there. Beings, there's many, many, many beings who never live on planets. They live aboard city ships. They live in these cluster, complex, mesh-like worlds. They live aboard the city ships and they form different purposes. So the city ship that I went to, I call it the big ship. Its purpose is for integrating beings from different realities where they could come together. It's very easy for them to, I don't know the exact technique, but they are able to, like what they did for me, bring my consciousness aboard the big ship. And they educate beings. They have a pre-settlement program where we form these after a lot of training. Well, first you have to learn telepathy. That's the first thing. I get into that in great detail in the book, exactly how I was taught and learned telepathy. There's 4 stages to it. But once you learn telepathy, then you go into training for whatever you want to train in. So I was super curious about all the plants which are abundant aboard the big ship. And that led to specializations that led me into the pre-settlement program. So we form these expeditions, we go to these other worlds, and there are, like I said, everything there, the water, the oxygen, gravity, plants, trees, birds, fish, animals, everything's there, but no humanoids. And we do really careful analysis of all aspects of the planet, and then we take that back to the big ship, and that information is used for future resettlement purposes of humanoids, because they care very much about the biosphere and the ecosystems, how they're interrelated, how they're interdependent. And there is a way that you can resettle humanoids without screwing up the planet, because each planet is considered a self-contained, conscious, complex, amazing entity in itself. And so there's great respect to all beings, large and small. So that's the pre-settlement program. And so I was involved in that, and that's also in my book. And then I had the privilege of visiting 2 fairly recently settled worlds. And one was a water world, and it was very high tech. And I also went to another world that was what we would consider a very low tech. In fact, they took no technology with them. Everything they needed and wanted was found on the planet, and they used just the natural environment to build their communities. They were very, very different, and I explain what my visit was like to both of those worlds, the beings, what we ate, what we did recreationally, culturally, what their homes were made out of, everything. I get into great detail about that in the book. And then the other thing that they're involved in is a resettlement program. So there's a reason why a lot of beings don't live on planets. Planets can be fairly unstable. They go through what we would consider thousands of years of stability, but then, with sun flares or a comet, or the planet itself may be evolving or expanding. Like there's always stuff, pole shifts, God knows what, right? And so what they do is they resettle. But this is the catch. People think, a lot of people know about resettlement, but they think, oh, well, when things get really bad here on Earth, they're just going to come and grab us and relocate us. And it actually doesn't work that way, Rex. First of all, they have great faith that we can sort out our own issues, that we can personally choose to become the change and make the change through changing ourselves on this planet, right? The other thing, too, is with technologies. Can you imagine if we had total open source, zero technology and anti-gravity? Man, this planet can hold so many beings. We can live underground, we can live above ground, we can live underwater, we can live above water, we can live in the stratosphere, we can live in the north, the south, we can live anywhere. We can have all kinds of cities that are like efficient and clean, maybe domes. Like I live in Alberta, it's pretty cold here in the wintertime, 6 months out of the year. Well, we could have dome cities, and maybe the domes, I don't know, disassemble or dissolve in the summertime, and then they close up just for the winter month. Like there's no shortage of the amazing paradise we could have here on Earth, and we can do all of that without help from ET. And that's what they're hoping and waiting for.
Yeah. What do the engineers look like?
Okay, see this image beside me? Okay, so when this happened, I had super long white hair. So the being in the middle represents me. These are AI generated, and I have quite a few images in my book too. They're in grayscale. You could get color copies from my website, but you'll see the being on one side looks very much like us. You wouldn't even know that she was an ET if you didn't know, except probably she'd be taller and more beautiful than most of us. The one on the other side looks more like what we would consider, oh, yeah, that's an ET, definitely not human, right? And so they had appearances that ran the whole gambit in between. So there were some that looked like stereotypical grays. There were some that looked just like us. There were some that are way taller, like 10 feet tall, and they look those, those in the Epic of Gilgamesh, those pictures of Gilgamesh with the lion, and they're super tall and they're super stocky and they got all the ringlets and their beard is all in ringlets. Well, I saw a small group of them and they were beautiful, and I was like staring at them because, oh my God, can you imagine 10 feet tall, stocky beings? And I didn't see any of their females. I only saw the males, and they really kept to themselves. I talk about them in the book. There are a few beings who are very much like us, but they're aquatic. Now they're not really aquatic. That's just what I call them. They live in fluid habitats. But this is the interesting part. I'll save some of that for later when we're on Patreon. But they actually, it's not water, it's not H2O. The medium that they live in is fluid, but it has the same oxygen content as what our atmosphere has. And so we can actually go into their habitats and survive for short periods of time to interface with them. I don't know a whole lot about them, but I describe them in great detail. They have no hair. Their skin is like what we would see on a killer whale or a dolphin, kind of shiny and smooth. They're kind of a smoky blue color. They definitely have gills, but their gills are like very much like our lungs. and are breathing, but they got little gill vents behind their ears, and their noses are more slit shaped. I've got images in my book of them. Um, I found some beings that were quite different than humans. For instance, there are some beings and they have all kinds of speckles and spots on them. They're olive skinned and they have all these speckles and spots on them, and they wear clothes that expose a lot of these speckles and spots. And what I soon found out is that they are able to emphasize and rearrange these speckles and spots as part of their communication. So although we speak telepathically, they're able to emphasize, instead of using gestures like what we would use, they actually can rearrange these speckles and spots. There are other beings who look very much like us, but they have the quality of our chameleons or our octopods. They have sensors in their skin that pick up their environment and mimic it. So they could blend into the wall or they don't disappear, they don't go liquid, they're still solid beings, but they can blend in. But the funny thing is they always wear like these super bright patterned clothing, and then you can see a hint on their skin, but you can always tell they're there. And because they're telepathic, you can also tell they're there as well. So they don't run around hiding on you or anything like that. Although they do have some sports that are what we would consider hide and seek, but they're actually much more complicated than that because they have to completely shield themselves telepathically in order to hide. And then it's up to the audience to try to find them. So, if they move or if you sense there was breathing or anything like that, you can find them. But that's done kind of as recreation. As far as skin tones go, a lot of different skin tones, but I'm going to tell you the majority of skin tones are what we would consider some shade of brown, from dark to light, in between. Some are real pale, some have no pigment, some are pink, some are orange, and some are even in the blue tones or the green tones. But most beings are actually olive-skinned. I did not see a lot of what we would call Nordics, and I had no experience with like reptilians, actual grays, avians or Pleiadians. I had no experience with any of the kind of beings that are often talked about on Earth from ET contact.
How big is this ship?
Big, real big. Like holds millions of beings. So I'm not exactly sure how big it was, but it had maybe 12 different floors. The inside is laid out like a labyrinth. At first, I had to use my handheld device to find my way around because it's so big. Some of them are even bigger, Rex. Some of them are as big as the Earth. Some of them are bigger than the Earth. Like they're massive, absolutely massive. And they have two transportation systems. They have a vertical lift system and they have a horizontal lift system. Well, not really lift system. So if you can imagine, the horizontal transportation system is a little bit like a conveyor belt, but there's no visible moving parts. You just stand there, desire it, the ship provides it. And, if you're going vast distances, it makes sense to use it. Most beings, though, they walk. That's sort of the only exercise I really saw them do besides sports. But the vertical lift system is really quite different. So you basically just come to an edge and you look down and it goes down, a long ways, like 2 kilometers to the docking bay from the floor I was on, right? And you step off onto nothing, but something captures you there. So you're suspended. And there's 2 rail, sort of handle grip rails in front. And depending on how hard you squeeze them, that dictates how fast your rate of descent is. So I squeezed them really hard because I wanted to just see how fast this baby would take me down. I thought it was hilarious. And there was another female being who was waiting to come down after me, and she jumped on head first, and she took the holds off, and she came racing down after me, kind of like mock pursuit. It was just all done in fun. We were both screaming and laughing. It was so much fun. When I got to the bottom, there was no impact. There was just like a little poof, and I stepped off. That's simple. It was amazing. Very slick. And so that was how we get around. I also want to tell you about the healing pods. So I was shown in my orientation the healing pods, and I used the healing pod in the beginning to condition my body. Now, here is where it gets weird because I don't really know if I was there physically, whether it was some kind of dual location. I have no idea, but when I went through the orientation process, I'm certain I was there with my real body somehow. Don't know how. Don't know if I was in two places at once. I don't know. I'm not a physicist. I'm sure someone could figure it out, but I'm not that smart. And so I was introduced to the healing pod. So I was taken into this room. By the way, there's no square rooms. Everything is cylindrical or ovoid shaped. Nothing is really square. So I was taken to this thing. Imagine it like a big auditorium, and it's filled with all these bean shaped devices, kind of circle within circle, all lined up within this giant kind of auditorium. Some of them were massive, like 10 or 12 feet long and super wide. And I imagined they would be for giant people, you know. Some of them were shorter. So I was taken to one, and the top lifts up like a clamshell. You climb inside. It's kind of like a bed of moss inside. It's kind of alive feeling and kind of moist feeling. And you lay down in there, and the top comes down, and we're treated with different kinds of frequencies. So light frequencies, sound frequencies, smell frequencies, like all of my senses were engaged while I was in there. And it was actually quite lovely. Much like when you go out into a really dense forest, you know how you feel like you're in a different dimensional reality when you're in a dense forest? It's moist and, oh my God, it makes your body come alive. It was like that. And I would always fall asleep when I was in them because I just loved it. But anyway, I fell asleep for a while, and then the top came up, and I woke up, and there was my buddy giving me a hand up. I felt so incredible. So that's the other thing a lot of people don't talk about. They don't talk about that when we go to other worlds. And when we're aboard the big ship, we have to have some conditioning. Our bodies can't just go from an earth environment, boom, into another plane of reality, boom, onto the big ship or even onto a different world without reconditioning your body. Every single world has a different oxygen content, different gravity, different cycles, different frequencies. They're all different, right? And you got to condition and prepare your body. So even to be aboard the big ship, we come from all different realities. We got to recondition so that we can be comfortable in that environment. So that's what the healing pods are for. And everybody's super healthy. And like, it's just really scary to come back and see how we all live and how toxic we are. We're toxic from our food, from our water, from the artificial frequency. I know on your show, you get into all of this stuff, Rex. You've done a great job educating us. So all of that, wow, really feeling it. Being back in my own body, after a while, I came to realize, I thought, why am I feeling so great when I'm on the big ship? Why do I look so good? Because I had a clone body. I had an identical clone body that my consciousness was transferred to while I was there. So you can imagine waking up in the morning and going, oh my God, my back hurts. Where's my glasses? I can't see, getting up. My feet are crippled from arthritis. Oh, sorry to paint such an ugly picture, but I'm just saying, my wrinkles are back. Oh my God, it was like traumatic to come back and to see the world as it is compared to how it could be. So these beings, they are only at our next stage of development. They're not like some millions of years ahead of us in development. No, they're at our next stage. And that's why it was so important for me to experience this and come back and tell everybody about it, because it's not that far away from us. If we clean up our world, clean up our bodies, detoxify, get going with technologies that supply what we need without polluting the world. And like, it could be so different. I know you're a visionary person, Rex. You can see how it could be, you know, and it's to inspire people. And then we haven't even talked about the culture or the personalities of the beings, which is actually more important than the way they look, you know. But
Are
I'll
there a
just
bunch of different? So when you described them earlier, you said you saw many different types and some that looked similar to the depictions of the Anunnaki and the Sumerian
yeah.
tablets. But when you're describing all these different looks, how is it that you say that they? I mean, what do you think they are? Do you think they come from different places? Do you think they're all from the same ship? Do you think they're just showing themselves to you in a specific way so that you'll interpret it? I mean,
No, I think they come from many different worlds. I think they come from many different worlds. And what we will find when we start having more contact, is that this basic body design that you and I have as humans is pretty universal and pretty interdimensional. Like, I would say the huge difference is, the grays, right? What we consider to be the grays. But the far majority, no, they look a lot like us. Most have larger heads in proportion to their bodies, which I would guess bigger brains, and most have larger eyes. So their eyes could be twice the size of ours proportionally if we were as tall or as short of them. Some of them are actually shorter than us. They're not all tall, but most are taller. Most have larger frames. Most have wider hands and feet than us. Very, very fit. Very, very fit. Beautiful. Very symmetrical faces. So I guess what they have is the technology, or through breeding, I don't know, but they have kind of reset their DNA to produce a more perfect template humanoid than what we have here on Earth. So we would find most of them beautiful, even in their diversity. And I have quite a few pictures in my book of them towards the end. These are in grayscale, but you can get all of these from my website in full color. Um, like I said, they look very much like us. A little bit of difference. Some are more different than others. But the point is what they physically look like doesn't matter. And I'll tell you how I really discovered this. This was really huge. And I get into this in great detail in my book. So before I had my genetic copy, I went up to the big ship and I was there um, where I needed physicality. And they have what I call a one size fits all generic clone body. Now, I don't know what these are made out of. I don't know if they're printed. I don't know if they're real clones. I don't know if they're synthetic, biological. I have no idea. But they're used for temporary physicality aboard the big ship. And they all look the same. You can kind of tell different beings apart because they have different mannerisms, different posture, different gesturing. You get to know them and you can kind of tell them apart, but they basically are identical. And I used one a couple of times. And when I used one for the first time, I looked in a mirror and it shook me to my core. You see, what I didn't realize until that point is I have all kinds of ideas in my mind about what I look like so that I don't feel like such a freak, Things where we think, oh, yeah, I'm a pretty handsome guy, or, oh, I'm not beautiful, but I'm not bad looking, or, whatever. I look intelligent with my glasses on, or whatever. We tell ourselves these false narratives so that we can cope with a society that's never satisfied with what we truly look like. We put way too much emphasis on looks. You can see that in the gender politics and in the concepts of racism. See, on the big ship, they don't have any of that. Beings are just beings, right? Anyway, so I looked in the mirror and I saw myself, and I was stripped, of course, of everything that I believed made me acceptable in my appearance on Earth. So I didn't think I was overly hideous. Not that I think I'm hideous, but my point. We have these egos and these self-identity ways of thinking. And when I looked in the mirror, I was stripped of all of that. And I realized that most of what I believe about myself is complete bullshit, fabrication to sort of soothe my conscious and my mind in this 3D environment. But I also realized it doesn't bloody matter what we look like. What matters is the condition of our heart, what kind of being we're striving to be, whether we're vibing on what I call the love harmonic, whether we're kind, whether we're mild, whether we're patient. These are the things that really matter. And from that experience, I was able to get closer to the ETs because it no longer mattered what they looked like. What mattered was their beautiful vibrational state and way of living and way of being that was so surpassed what we find here in our societies. And I only did that a couple times because I found it really creepy. I didn't like it. And when you're in a clone body, you don't eat and you don't poop and you don't, because it's very temporary. It's just a temporary way of having physicality. And then one time I did a consciousness swap with another being that was aboard the big ship. That was interesting. But besides that, I had my clone body, which was in perfect health. And I got to tell you, like the hardest thing of all of this is coming home and being real in this world. But my mission is to tell everybody, and that's why I've written a book.